I first started all of this madness in 1968 when I saw the original Planet of the Apes. I wrote to John Chambers, because I had already been doing movie stuff from the time I was about 8 years old, taking radio flyer wagons and turning them into camera dollies for making all our 8mm projects at home. Back then it was real 8mm film, even before Super 8 came in 1965. And I wrote to John, and unlike most people, a lot of people wrote to him and wanted all the secrets. One of the things I'll tell you about the film industry, make your own attempts first at work before you contact industry people. It shows an incentive. It's a work ethic. The reason John answered me is I sent him samples, no matter how crude they were. I sent him samples to show him that I at least was making an attempt, and he kind of opened the doors and he gave me the secrets. In fact, there were even two foam rubber formulas, and I was living in the Philadelphia area at the time. There was a West Coast formula that had one number, and there was an East Coast formula that had another number. So for convenience, John sent me both sets of numbers, and on the East Coast I was ordering from the same company but in Naugatuck, Connecticut. So that's how deeply he shared the secrets with me, down to the numbers of the foam. It came from the United States Rubber Company, Uniroyal, back then. And John had slightly modified it to get it softer and to get it more pliable for the purposes of Planet of the Apes. Have to remember, a lot of you young people, you see all this stuff all the time now, and it seems a little bit more commonplace. Back then, this was absolutely cutting edge. Nobody was doing this stuff. Not to that degree. Not to turning dozens or hundreds of people into apes. You know, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, and all of that. So I was very privileged that John took me under his wing and brought me up in the business. Well, after he taught me a lot, I did television in Philadelphia. I don't know, some of you here know the Philadelphia area. There was a very popular children's show back there that did go partly national called the Gene London Show. Some of my work was seen when I was going to the Philadelphia College of Art, and Gene tracked me down and put me on his show, and I worked on his show as a makeup artist, as an actor, as an effects artist in general, and my own on-camera personality, talking to the kids. I watched him growing up when I would go to school in the morning, and then when I was old enough, about 19 then, he puts me on the show, and I had already at 19 started teaching other children that came after me how to do all this stuff. And then finally, I had the opportunity to move to California in 1973. John Chambers had gotten me on to Conquest of the Planet of the Apes just to kind of apprentice and learn. And by 1974, when the Planet of the Apes television series was being done, because of my skill and because I mastered John's style so closely, I became the only actor in the history of the Planet of the Apes movies and television series to have sculpted his own piece for his part on the show. Now, over the years, they chopped stuff down. That's been kind of removed, but I'm working with 20th Century Fox's archives right now. We're trying to get that footage restored to the episodes and get it back in for new DVD and Blu-ray releases in the near future. So that's some of my credentials. I worked on a lot of films also, Independence Day, but in a different portion of it.
I worked on Independence Day as well.
Independence
We're
Day.
Still learning about each other. We've known each other 30 years. I didn't know we worked on that film.
Well, the real secret of it is in the movie industry, you'll find out something else too. As you aspire to get into the business, if you want to be a makeup artist, don't just do makeup. Learn. This is going to be partly, not all makeup today, it's going to be partly a maker experience with the new maker movement now. It's an unfortunate thing, but we've had a lot of manufacturing go to China. We've had factories closed down here. People are moving away from farms, away from rural areas, and they're going to the cities. And over a period of time, and I just had a conversation with a friend of mine last week, over a period of time, the ability to actually physically make things, and I don't just mean your lunch in the morning to take to work or take to school, or making a simple thing around the house. I mean serious making, which the farmers and the rural people and all of us, used to do. Now, I had a father who was a machinist at RCA, and before that at Baldwin Locomotive in World War II. I came from 3 generations at least of makers. We all made various stuff. My grandfather made radios, cut glass in Philadelphia. He printed. He was an artist at the Shore Artists Association in Atlantic City, New Jersey. All of these are forms of making, even though you wouldn't think about it in those terms. Even when you do a character or a cartoon voice, like I do character voices also, like Roddy McDowell from Planet of the Apes, like that. Your voice becomes the tool, and that is what you make with that tool, like that. So everything is about making. And some of it's more sophisticated than other things, but we're talking about some of the more sophisticated forms of making, some of the arts that have been lost. And I'm going to be showing later on a maker documentary. It's a little thing where we had clips from in school, showing kids, by giving them a handful of parts, how to actually make things. And even though this is a film festival, these outside concepts of making actually feed into the film industry, because naturally you're going to make stuff too. You got all the digital stuff now. God bless it. It's really, really great. We got Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes with guys in motion capture suits, and it's all digital apes animated over them now. But that still doesn't mean that for independent films and stuff, you don't have to really seriously make things. You can buy digital cameras, digital equipment. You can make your own movies, but it's what you put in front of that camera that's important. And you've got sophisticated editing now on computers. Yes, you do. But my philosophy is the more you can get real in front of the camera, the more you're going to sell your audience. That's the important thing. And that's partly what we're doing here today. And again, he's real, he's not digital, so he's going to walk around later on. You'll be able to get some pictures, he'll be shaking hands and everything. You're going to see a full classic gorilla strolling around the festival. And maker philosophy, this goes into all kinds of things. Other than makeup, I've done props, I've done special effects, and what I was starting to touch on earlier was, in this business, even if you want to only do makeup, learn how to do other things. Learn how the other departments function. And also, it's a bread and butter thing. If, we already know that this is a challenging, difficult business to work in. And not everybody gets work. With acting in particular, it's really difficult. Because for every role, 200 people come in and only one person's going to get it. How I paid my bills when the acting wasn't coming through? I went and did effects. I went and did makeup. I would go up and I would nail up props. I would put up flats and sets and things over the years. There's nothing below you in this business. It's all part of the craft. It's all the process of getting from point A to point Z. So never think that it's below you or anything. Just drive a few nails, nail gun, stapler, whatever, and then work on your own stuff in the private time that you've got. So I'm going to be showing some examples of various stuff that I've made. Some of it bridges on makeup. For instance, this is my sculpt right here. That's my own personal sculpt from Planet of the Apes. And this is an original chambered sculpt from Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. You can see I got the style down pretty good. It's a different character, so it's textured a little bit differently, but I nailed the nose and everything, all the basic features of it. This was a reprint from the Roddy McDowell piece. If anybody saw Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, this is printed from the exact mold for the close-up scene where he has the confrontation with Governor Breck at the end of the movie. Your servant, your animal. This is that exact piece. So this was really, really a close-up piece. It's got beautiful detail. Chambers always did wonderful detail in makeup effects.
I remember when I was the first appliance, original appliance, screen-used appliance I held in my hand. I was in 9th grade or 10th grade, and some girl brought it to me for Halloween to make her up at Halloween. And I said, "Where did you get this?" She had a relative that worked in the business and had acquired it that way, and I was very, very impressed. I was just learning how to sculpt at that time, and I was very impressed with the detail, the wrinkle patterns. It was really beautiful. It looked like a sponge. If you ever take a sponge and squeeze it, all of these little tiny... Even this appliance that was sculpted for Alan's face is actually based off an original appliance.
Yeah, and I can see the sculpting and the detail that you got there. Chambers had a method where, of course, most of this stuff for small appliances is done in oil-based clay on a life mask. Now, a life mask, let me grab one right here. This is the plastic reproduction. I've got a heavy one down there I don't want to lift up right now. But that's the casting made from the actor. We vacuum formed over it. We also use that as a convenient tray, as you saw here, to store the pieces on it, keep them in shape. It's actually a shape preserver that keeps everything together until you put it on the actor's face. In Planet of the Apes, we had cabinets full of these things, because when you stick it on, if something happens to it, you got to almost start over from scratch. So they had like 3 sets for every actor for emergencies, or in case they accidentally pried the jaw off and damaged it at lunchtime or something, because eating was difficult. You were using chopsticks, fondue forks, and straws and things to eat and drink and everything. But anyway, it starts with the life mask, and the life mask, you sculpt over it in an oil-based clay on the plaster or dental stone one. And then the texturing that Chambers used to do, he used to use alcohol, and he used to use brushes, and he would sculpt the hard cut in for the wrinkle. And then the alcohol with the brush would temporarily soften the oil surface of the clay, and it would sort of smooth it out a little bit, and you've got that organic feel. Now, as far as the texture, you see the texture like skin texture on these ape appliances. Anybody have any idea? Thinking about it, any makeup students here, do you know how that's done on the clay? Anybody have any idea?
I know.
Yeah, well, of course you do.
Well, I'm a student. I never quit learning. Actually, that's very true.
Yeah.
You pick up things all the time.
It was a combination of texturing sponges and, believe it or not, grapefruit and orange peel texture. You would make a rubber mold which would come out negative of the pores of the orange or grapefruit or whatever. Gorillas were more like grapefruit because of the heavier pores, pore texture on them, the bigger pore texture. And you would make a little mitt out of that. You would cut it up to a convenient size, put it in your sculpting kit, and you would literally tap that on the clay, which is a printing method to kind of like get you through it faster. Yeah, you could sit and you could sculpt everything piece by piece by piece. But we were also looking for expediency, too. This stuff had to be cranked out in a certain amount of time for a whole bunch of actors and extras. So the orange peel and the different texturing sponges and things, they help you a lot. I'll give you an example of one that I did here. There was an independent film a few years ago called Killer on the Road, sort of a horror piece, about a guy who's killed by somebody in the back of a pickup truck in the desert. And this is the cast of the actor. This was his own life mask. It was cast in the dead position. And of course, it was going to be filled out with a dummy and wardrobe and everything. And then over a period of time, out in the desert, the body dries out and mummifies. And this is the same casting that was recast in clay, and then it was shrunk in and worked in, except for the size of the head, because the skull would be a shape preserver and it wouldn't get smaller. So we left the head the same. But all that texture on there you see, that is dehydrated potato. Because potato has a skin. A potato is organic, just like a human skin. So you would put it out in the sun, you would put it out on the windowsill for a few days, let it pucker and shrink to what you wanted. Once you got the texture the way you liked it, dip the whole thing with a coat hanger into a slurry of latex, and then undip it and then dip it a few more times so it built up some layers. And then when you were done, you would take a knife and you would cut it, take the potato out, and then slice it into those convenient little sculpting mitts that I talked about. But this is all a combination of sculpting and a combination of the potato skin, and it gives a very nice mummified skin. We also studied the Egyptian mummies, too. And in this horror piece, the guy dies in the back of the truck, but his soul is still inhabiting the body. And this pickup truck is kind of like a Flying Dutchman that goes across the desert trying to seek out and kill him. So we started here. Of course, we started with the actor. We got there, and then we wound up here when the body had mummified. So that's an example of texture, using texture. It goes beyond that. When you get into the makeup effects, sometimes you're doing an animatronic. You're doing like a puppet thing where it's not the actor anymore. It's a completely false thing. So you have to do things like dental castings using real dental acrylics. This is this is the test set that actually would go in the mouth and would go with this guy here. This is actually the actor's teeth on this. These are dental acrylics that are done in, if anybody's ever been to the dentist office, had anybody ever had dental impressions made? With alginate, she has. Of course she has. You probably had more impressions made here than anybody and in different parts than just your dentures.
Actually, Martha is our mutant from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. There are pictures online. But yeah.
That was real fun.
That was fun.
But you get into that kind of casting where you actually work with the dental acrylics, you work with resins, you start to work with silicone molds, molding things very precisely. Now, part of the maker movement right now, I see a lot about 3D printing, and those printers, some are available to the public. I still see those as a little bit in their infancy because they kind of spit out scanned lines. If you got like $1 million, you can get a huge factory-sized one and you can make almost perfect stuff. But the ones they have right now, they kind of spit out lines. And I say that they have kind of the cornflake syndrome. The way the plastic's deposited, they're a little bit brittle too. They make nice display pieces. They're good for some decorative. I've known people that have made jewelry with them and things like that. I think it's still a little bit in its infancy. But when you use the silicone technology, for instance, now, I told you about taking outside jobs, things away from the film industry. This is actually a resin casting done off of an original set of plastic parts. This is the limiter switch. Now, this is really way out there. This is the limiter switch that goes in the back of a 1960s Lincoln Continental automobile with a convertible top like the President Kennedy car. And this casting here, this was done off the originals because, of course, they're hard to find anymore, and I was making these for a while. About 200 cars in the country had my parts on them for the limiter switch. That literally works the hydraulic valve electrically and keeps the convertible top from cranking down and breaking the windshield, or cranking back and like twisting all the parts and everything into the trunk when you put it up. So that's an example. This was done from silicone molds, and that was injected into the silicone molds with syringes. So it's half poured to make sure you don't have the air bubbles. You close the mold and you inject the rest into it. So it's sort of a poor man's injection molded part in a small-scale manufacturing. And I've done hundreds and hundreds of these for people. These are the molds, as simple as taking cups and wooden blocks and things. There, the original part is down in there. And you can see in there, the piece sitting in there with all the keys and everything. So when you pour the first half of the silicone, that picks up that impression. Then you pull it apart, and then you pour the second half, and then you've got the second half of the piece. You try and find logical dividing lines. Places where, let me see, I have some of the molds down here. Yeah. You try and find a logical dividing line. This one was easy because this was right at the seam line of the disc for the part. And in this case, I put the screws in with mold release on them so that they come out threaded automatically. It's a finished part when it comes out of the mold. And the keys here for the holes that you put the screws through them torque the two parts together. Just put mold release on two solid brass rods of the right size. So you can see, now we've gone from makeup effects to outside functional hardware and movie props or gun handles or anything else that you want to make with this technology. Here's one that I did with the same technology. This is a mold for an obsolete Aris dune buggy or motorcycle light for off-roading. And a guy came to me that had two lights, one lens broken. We took the remaining lens, and this is actually the casting of the original glass part, but it's water clear. And he took it to bike shows and they couldn't tell the difference. There's an injection mark. When you inject glass into a mold, you get a little bit of a tiny ripple pattern across the surface. You can't really see them close. I'll pass this one around if you guys want to take a look at it. If you look at it in the right light, it's so precise with the silicone mold, it actually picks up the ripple pattern of where the original glass was injected into the original molds for these things. And that's an ultraviolet stabilized, meaning that that can be used out in the sun without getting too brittle or cracking. That would last for years. That piece there is already about 12 years old. So that's just some of the things that you can do. Again, like I said, we're extending out into the maker universe of taking and making all different kinds of things. One of the things I was always fascinated with was the Steadicam, these camera stabilizers. And I never ever had the money on lower industry standards to be able to buy one of those. So I decided I was going to make one. So I partnered up with a friend of mine, Russell Chadwell, and we put together a project to make what we call the Cineglide. And that's another maker project, again, hogged out of solid aluminum with milling machines and things. I'll give you guys, any of you young students, recommendations for some of the machines that you can use actually to make this stuff too that are fairly reasonable if you want to buy them from the different machine companies. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick demo with this now and show you how this works. You improvise, part of the maker thing again. I've got friends who are musicians, so the holder for the sled of the stabilizer is actually a guitar stand. My friend Russ was in the military. He used to do backpack hikes. We modified the Alice pack frames from the Army to make what's called a rear-mounted vest. Arguably, we're probably the guys that came up with the rear-mounted vest in the film industry. We never patented it, we just simply did it. This was built in 1992. And I started seeing a lot of rear-mounted vests coming out. We took the belly belt on the thing that's normally used around the waist. That was a little bit too weak. So I took a lumbar belt that's used for people lifting in warehouses to support their backs. And I riveted plates onto it, and I made identical plates to match up with where the original belt would go, and then turned the other belt into a chest plate to support it so it doesn't wag up top. Again, all part of the maker philosophy. Give me 1 second here. And if you have any questions or anything for Mike in the meantime, I'll be like about 30 seconds here with this.
Yeah, anyone have any questions? You're all going to go home and try this out yourself? Yes, sir.
The way you're applying the makeup, would this be the same amount of time you would do on set, or are you doing this?
This makeup takes about. This makeup takes about. Takes about 3 hours normally.
Oh, okay. And that would stay, what, for 4 hours, you said?
He says 4, I told him it was 3.
And that would last all day?
Yeah, they would wear it all day, yeah.
Wow.
You had a question?
Yeah, what are you putting on here with
This is a glue, it's a medical grade glue called Prosaid. And this was spearheaded, check it out. Okay. This was spearheaded by Dick Smith, very famous makeup artist who just recently passed away at the age of 92. And he was a real trendsetter. He developed a lot of techniques, and he was always looking outside the box. And the makeup community owes him a lot for what he developed.
That's kind of a funny story about it too, Mike. The funny thing is that Rick Baker, who was trained by Dick Smith, lived in California, and Dick Smith lived in New York. And John Chambers lived in California, and I lived back in the Philadelphia area. So Rick Baker got trained from California by way of New York, and I got trained from the Philadelphia area by way of John Chambers in California. We made kind of a big X across the country. Okay.
This young man has a question.
Yes.
Oh, what parts did you do for Jurassic Park?
Actually, on Jurassic Park, I worked as a sculptor, not a makeup person, and I did, what did I do? I worked on lots of the set, actually, lots of rocks and trees on the Universal lot. Trying to think if I did anything else. Actually, I got a little side job, which actually gets a lot more screen time than the other stuff I built, which was the little tiny mound of dirt where the eggs are hatching. I did the little mound of dirt. But I'm happy because every time I watch the movie, I see it really clearly. The other thing, sometimes with the smoke and the fog and the music, you don't see it as well.
Right. Now I have a little cross-connect with you there too. I actually did something for Jurassic Park 2, The Lost World. But again, it wasn't makeup effects. I had done a movie called Congo, and for that I built the laser uplink dishes and the flat screen, the laptops for that. And the filmmakers, Michael Crichton, who did both the books, he liked my little uplink dish so much that you see when Goldblum and the other guy get on the island, they put that little satellite uplink on the thing. That was actually originally from Congo, and they liked it so much they transferred it over to Jurassic Park Lost World. So I've got 2 credits off of 1 prop, 1 device. But this is the stabilizer. Everything here I built except for the bearings and any of the nuts and bolts. And this started as, this is a modular project. This is an idea that when you're developing things, especially for the film industry, you want to have stuff that you can maybe trade off and that you can kind of like change from time to time, but don't lose the function of it. Oh, you have a question?
Yeah. The different techniques between Stan Winston and Rick Baker, do you know if there's any?
The core techniques, Mike, would you agree that they're basically the same?
Are they?
And in a lot of cases, you have to realize that their name is on the banner. But a lot of times guys trade around, and you'll have some of the same guys working for Stan Winston that you'd have working for Rick Baker.
Okay.
If there's no movie going at the time over at Rick's, then he's going over to the Stans.
So the same? Yeah.
A lot of the techniques are the same, yeah.
Okay.
The masters will be sculpted by the head guy. He'll make it up, and then his guys will emulate it, duplicate it, whatever.
Right, okay.
And that's, again, how some of the techniques will travel from shop to shop.
Mm-hmm.
One person will bring something new to the table, and then 6 months later he's working for somebody else. And then in a year, you see everybody does gelatin appliances or whatever it is.
Right, it all gets traded around.
It gets spread around. Oh, that's a great idea. Let's do that.
Okay, now the stabilizer works pretty much the same as a Steadicam would work. It's almost as sophisticated, not quite as pretty. I don't apologize anymore for all the chip paint because I'm constantly changing it. But this is one of the things I was talking about a moment ago about modularity. You notice the springs are on the outside. That was the beginning design because they're accessible, they're easy to get to. You can work on it. You can change spring loads quickly for different weight cameras. These canisters here are mock-ups right now of the internal spring mechanism, and I have a new suspension system I've developed. I can't talk about it. It's proprietary, but it's a new type of a suspension system that's going to go internal after that. But I'm going to leave the outriggers, so if I'm on set and I've got the internal spring mechanisms and suddenly my load gets heavier, I have to put another piece of equipment or a bigger lens on it, I can always load the outer springs. Those will always be there, even though I don't want them to be the final thing. And you can see how smooth it is. This was all hogged out of solid blocks of aluminum on a horizontal and vertical milling machine. And the case was $1.50 from a swap meet for the battery box. People think stabilizers have gyroscopes in them and things. There's a couple that they put in there now to make them a bit steadier, but it's all done by suspension, and it's like the human arm. It has an upper arm, it has an elbow, it has a forearm, and it has a wrist. And of course a slit, that's not part of us. There you go. Another example of the maker experience. You guys can make these too if you wanted to. You want to tell us a little bit about the monkey goop you're putting on this man here?
Yeah, sure, Fuel.
Wow, oh, this is really something. Is that what you would call a monkey?
Yeah, this is the monkey right out of the can.
So this is a monkey. This is a monkey that you're making out of this man.
It's amazing.
It's absolutely hey, Cameron, are you getting this one over here, Cameron? Let's get this.
Well, I got this one over here.
California gold. Yeah, this is just another example of California gold. Yes, by all means. Anyway, I'm a ham. I have to throw in some impressions. So is Mike, so you'll get that from us today.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I'm busy
I was
over
going to
here.
say, I noticed that when Rick Baker worked on the one in Burton,
Yes.
he did try to embellish on the makeup work by individualizing each ape
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah.
In the original by the apes, all the chimps and all the orangutans and all the gorillas were almost the same, except for the main one.
Yeah.
The main one they gave them.
The main ones were sculpted on the actual life mask, but when you got into the lesser performers and when you got into the extras, they would have various sizes, and what they would do is they would do like fit in a shoe at a shoe store. They would take it to the first size that would fit that particular actor. And that's one of the problems that we had with the Planet of the Apes television series. You had very quick turnaround times, and you had actors coming in, even if it's a big guest actor, okay? You didn't have time to do all the casting because you're doing like a 1 week turnaround on this thing, from your reading to actually filming the thing. So they would do stretch fits on most of the guest actors, and it suffered a lot for that reason. That's why I mentioned it. I'm the only actor who ever got to sculpt his own piece because of my prior experience as a makeup artist. I actually supplied them the pieces, and to keep it within local 706 union standards, they had to send my pieces over to the lab and do something on them. They spray painted them to the color. They set in the specific teeth. These teeth right here. Those are set in by the makeup department and they're sprayed to the color, you know, to match everything else. But it was my sculpt because it was so close to John.
So you worked on the television show?
Yeah, I was actually an actor on the television show, and then from there.
I love that series. I have it on DVD actually.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Loved it.
Well, like I said,
I was sad it only went 20 episodes.
they've been pared down over the years, and if you look at them, there's a lot of like little artifacts, and you see like little problems with the film and everything. I'm trying to talk them into getting all of that restored and everything, and it all comes with, even studios have to worry about the bottom line about money.
Well, I know a lot of makeup artists are afraid that their jobs are going all CGI now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
that's
think it's sad because there's so much work those guys are such great artists doing that.
Well, that's one of the other things that I mentioned. You know, a little story, it's kind of side. I don't know, do you know about this, Mike? Do you know that for some reason, on a $150 million remake of Planet of the Apes, the Tim Burton version, did you know that for some crazy reason, Fox sent the hands out to China to do the ape hands? I don't know. I haven't been able to get an explanation to this day. There were artists like me that would have come in and would have done that. Mike would have come in and done that. But they sent them over to China, and I don't know what that was about. I've got to talk to Rick at some point and ask him what that was all about.
Budgets.
I thought they did already.
Yeah, well, that's another reason we're pushing the maker thing, to get more people making things here. Take it under your control. You know, make it yourself. Anyway, any other questions?
Did those hands last through the production?
What's that?
Did those hands last through the production?
Yeah.
They did?
Yeah, they did. They did. But anyway, yeah. And even for some of the principals, because they were more like, most of those were like a glove form. In ours, they painted our fingernails, they used a pancake makeup on our hands because they were a little bit more human, and they stuck hair pieces on the back of our hands that went up inside the costume and were taped off inside. So it was our own hands just colored to make it look like the color of the face to match. So that was human hands. Now, when Rick Rick is the commensurate ape guy. So he's done all of the, like he did the King Kong in 1976 with Jessica Lange, and he's done Gorillas in the Mist and things like that. So he's a purist. He made the fingers like chimpanzee fingers, a little bit more pointed with the different nails and everything. They figured the best way to do that was a kind of a glove form to be able to make that work. So, anything else from anybody? Yes?
I think that's a question. What new package doing now today?
What are they doing today?
Yeah.
I've already heard that the next one, the Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, did so well that they're already working on the next one, putting together for the next one.
How do you make that kind of program? How would that work on that one?
Oh, how do they do that?
Yeah.
What that is you've seen Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
You saw the Peter Jackson remake of King Kong.
Yeah.
Well, Caesar, the ape that used to be Roddy McDowell in the old movies, and the one that I've done the character for, that is now Andy Serkis, the same guy who played Gollum in Lord of the Rings, and he played King Kong in the King Kong remake in 2005. And what that is they put you in a leotard, in a suit. You've got points on you, like zones, and those zones are read as you move. And that's what they call motion capture. And on the case of Andy and some of the other actors that have to be expressive in the CGI, they have a halo that they put on your head with a bracket that hangs out, and it actually focuses a camera on your face. So it picks up the facial movements also. And that's all translated into the computer as zones, X, Y, Z coordinates, like on a milling machine for CNC milling. And they take all of those coordinates and they build wireforms on the computer, and then they animate the ape over top of it. Now the ape is programmed to follow all of those expressions, movements, body language, and everything of the guys playing the apes in the movie. They used to have to do all of that on what's called a green screen, just about the color of that man's shirt right there. But now they've got the technology down to the point where they can isolate it out in public. So now they can go out to actual sets, actual locations, and the motion capture can actually be done in real time, not necessarily on green screen stages. So you're acting with what's supposed to be an ape, and it's a guy with this big brace on his head and these little dots all over him in a leotard, kind of a bodysuit kind of a thing. So, but you're still interacting with a living person. And the expressions will be the same. They're just going to manifest on an ape muzzle by the time it's done. They've even got some playback right now where they can kind of like translate it in just to get a rough form of what it is for a video assist type thing. They can actually kind of play it back and get some semblance of the ape right live on set for the purpose of retakes in case something doesn't go quite right. So that technology is pretty advanced. Unfortunately, it's put a lot of the makeup guys out of business. But the one thing I tell everybody here, any aspiring makeup students or anything, the one thing that's really important, the maker thing again. Even if they replace a lot of this with CGI in the motion picture industry, there's still going to be independent films where somebody can't afford to do that or doesn't know how to do it. There's still going to be live productions. There's going to be plays. Some of our greatest success with Planet of the Apes was me and my partner Paula Chris going out and doing it on the road where people could touch us, shake our hands, and everything, and they could actually see us in real life. You can't do digital on stage on Broadway or plays or anything. You got to have the real practical stuff. You know, even though it was fraught with some problems, Spider-Man on stage, they did all the real cables and everything, and there was no CGI, of course. It was all sets, and it's all live actors and makeup and costumes and everything. That's the old castle freestyle.
Bill, I will not challenge you ever again. It's a cakewalk.
No, it's not. It's an ape walk.
Oh, you scared me. You scared me. Don, guess what? Mr. Decker called the interview that we had to cancel. It's back on. We gotta go. Yep. Gotta go. We gotta go. The other makeup has to come off. We don't have time for that. It's an hour and a half process to get this makeup off. I don't think that's 10 minutes. We're gonna be there in 15 minutes for the interview. Yes. Let's go. You have to go like that. That's the only way you can do it.
I'm Chase Masterson from Deep Space Nine, and you're watching SFM Science Fiction News.
There you go. It was actually from 1996. I had just done a science fiction convention, and they tapped me to do that piece. I've got a whole bunch more we don't have time to get into right now, but that's just like a... Well, I'm done, Mike. How about you?
Now, wondered,
Yeah.
I've heard that a lot of times actors can get claustrophobic.
Oh.
Sitting there for like 3-4 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
Some
Kim
of them
Hunter.
sleep.
Kim Hunter, yes, some sleep. Kim Hunter from Planet of the Apes. As brilliant as she was as Zira in that movie, she had a terrible problem with the makeup. She was on Valium most of the time. And how she could act through that, I have no idea.
Well,
No
Ryan
idea.
McDowell always says you had to act through the makeup.
Yeah, I was in makeup rooms when I was apprenticing with Roddy McDowell and Natalie Trundy, the wife of the producer who played the ape character Lisa in the two later movies. And Roddy's thing was to play classical music and go to sleep while they're sticking the stuff on. You know.
Wow.
I have some old footage I'm getting from Fox right now that's me with the Super 8 camera shooting right over Roddy's shoulder, and you see me reflected in the mirror. But everybody had their own way of coping. Sal Mineo in Escape from the Planet of the Apes, he was a total head case. They had to literally like hold his hand and talk him through it to get him through
I
it.
guess that's good thing he died in his very first.
Now, a funny thing, Roddy was claustrophobic to a degree, but Roddy would always power through it. He would with the performance. He was a photographer. He'd be climbing up and down ladders, taking Super 8 movies and taking stills and everything of everybody else. He took his mind off of it. One of the things I noticed as I started to get older is that I started getting a little claustrophobic, and I used to spend days in this stuff. There's tours that I did where we learned how to live in the makeup. We would put it on and it would come off 4 days later. We moved it the whole time. And the longest I was ever in it continuously without taking it off was 8 days.
Oh my God.
I literally flew to Detroit. They drove us to the World Science Fiction Convention in Washington, D.C. We didn't have time to take it off before the flight. We flew back on United Airlines to Los Angeles. Flew on the plane with Dinah Shore and Mel Torme. And we were bigger celebrities than they were, because you have to remember at the time, Planet of the Apes was very, very hot. That was the huge thing before Star Wars came. So we were major celebrities. That's where I learned how many decks there were on a 747, because we were kind of privileged. We actually got to go up and down the stewardesses or the flight attendants' elevators up and down, the galleys in the belly of the plane between the 2 cargo compartments. We actually, it's cold down there, but we actually, because we were kind of celebrities, they got to crank us up and down and take us to the 3 different levels of the plane and everything. Yeah. Question? Did you have a question? I thought I saw your hand go up. Anybody else? Yes?
Do you have any footage of these tours?
Fox has that right now. I had some thefts, some stuff stolen a number of years ago. Thank goodness we transcribed all that digitally for Behind the Planet of the Apes. There's little pieces of my footage that are inserted in behind. The extended version on DVD, you'll see later on when they're talking about Conquest, and Natalie Trundy waves at the camera. She was kind of a party girl, so she was out all night with an hour's sleep. She came in at like 4 or 5 in the morning to get the stuff put on. That shot with her waving at the camera and the shots of Roddy and everything, I shot those. I shot those sequences. Yeah, and I'm trying to get the full footage from Fox. It was 14 and a half minutes total, and it had part of our tour in it when we performed in Hawaii.
You can also find on YouTube, Roddy McDowell was quite the photographer, and he took some 16mm film.
Yeah, 16 inch.
You can find that. It's about 20 minutes of footage,
yes,
including an entire transformation which you just watched by himself. He held the camera right there in the mirror.
Roddy arguably did the original selfies.
It's really fun.
Ape selfies.
He has all kinds of footage.
Well, we had no YouTube and we had no Facebook to put them on at the time, so they sat in a vault for a long time. But my footage is stored with Roddy's footage, because when we did Behind the Planet of the Apes, it was all put together with Van Ness Films. It was a splinter company of 20th Century Fox that produced all of that first for American movie classics, and then they expanded it out, and it became bonus features in all the Apes movies, all of the DVD and Blu-ray packs and everything. Question?
Like the original Dracula, did you have to go on and make up?
Boris Karloff was the original Frankenstein.
Wait.
But, interesting story for you. Bela Lugosi, who was Dracula, was supposed to be the original Frankenstein, and because he was like a classically trained actor, he thought it was beneath him and he turned the role down. They finally got him to do it years later for Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. He plays the monster in that.
I love that.
When they found out the monster was alive and down in the bottom of the castle, he fights with the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr. Yeah. Anything else? Yes?
What's a good way, like you said, for aspiring makeup artists to get started? I mean,
There are some schools around. There are some schools around, but my suggestion, personally, and only because I lived that experience too, take some of these suppliers and everything, and they have how-to tapes now and videos and things. They have how-to books, kind of like the Dick Smith book back in the day, but more sophisticated now. Study on your own, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Try to do it. It was my trying to do it, even though it wasn't completely successful. They got the notice of John Chambers in the first place. He told me, he says, Lad, he called everybody Lad that he trained. Lad, he says, you're one of the ones that I responded to because you didn't want everything on a silver platter. You didn't want me to hand you all the secrets and not work for it. So you got to work for it, try a little bit. My experimentation was taking an old cushion foam, scissoring it out into the shape of an ape, sticking it on my face with spirit gum, and then just blotting the heck out of it with latex, and then putting some latex bands with hair on it, and an old, like, thrift store wig, you know, for the top of the ape's head. And you could peel the whole thing off when you were done, and it became a mask that you could easily put back on.
Mine was orange peel. I did my first Planet of the Apes for a talent show in school out of an orange peel. And it worked great.
There you go. There's all kinds of ways of doing it. Dick Smith would do stuff like that. He would take common household items, and in the makeup handbook, he would show you how to take breadcrumbs and latex on your face to make like kind of like a crusty, mummified face kind of a thing. And the breadcrumbs would be suspended in the latex and would become part of it. So again, it was a mask you could pull off.
I also heard that orange peel is also good for using textures for like the rubber appliance.
That's what we were just talking about earlier. You would take an orange, or in the case of the mummy back there, a potato.
Yeah, so you don't have to do that sculpt.
Yeah, you dip it in latex. Now that makes the negative, and then you take it and cut it into convenient sizes for sculpting, and you pat that on the oil-based clay in random patterns so it doesn't look too repeated.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a kind of a stamping, texture stamping. You can also use ocean sponges, you know, things like that. Dampen a sponge and then press it on there. And I usually use the alcohol too. The alcohol makes like a barrier. It also melts the surface of the clay momentarily until it evaporates, and it gives you a little bit softer surface to work on. You can also brush it out with bristle brushes and things to get more of an organic look. You cut the lines into it, but those are hard cuts. So you have to take the alcohol to soften it out. It makes a nice organic feel to it. That kind of thing. Okay. Last question. You had a question? This movie was called Killer on the Road. I don't even know if they got it out. It was an independent film. And it was a friend of mine, so I didn't work for him. I helped him out on it. So, and I'm not even going to say that that's California Gold. That, my friends, is California Platinum.
By the way, the one piece of the costume that is original is the bandolier. This is from the original film. It's part of my collection at home.
Oh my God.
I haven't had time to make a copy, so this is the original one. The rest of the... Huh?
Where's our character's voice that we just talked about?
Have you said anything yet?
Gorillas rule!
Walk softly and carry a big wooden gun.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I just noticed that I'm going about 2 minutes over. I promise.